It was the 4th of August 1944. You know, it was always my task to go as first up in the hiding place. Also this day. I go up, took my shopping list, talk with the people, and came down. After an hour, I was working in the office. Beb in front of me, Koophuis on this side. The door goes open, but I did not look. And it was quiet. And the moment I look up, and there was a man standing for me with a gun to me and said, "Quiet, no words."
Was there ever a plan for this sort of situation?
No. We were so sure that it never would happen.
The authorities had been tipped off by an anonymous phone call that there were Jews hiding in the Opekta offices. 4 Dutch plainclothes policemen from the German security service, led by an Austrian officer, went straight to the secret bookcase.
I could hear the voice of the Nazi. And I heard this man spoke with a Autriche, with a Vienna accent. And if you know, I'm born in Vienna, I know that accent. I stand up and say to him in a nearly friendly mean, "You are a Vienna. I'm a Vienna too." And this one sentence was perhaps too much for this man. He was standing there, looked at me, and when he came to him, he came to me, gebukt, so near to me that I feel his adem, his breath. I feel his breath. Schämst du dich nicht, Judenbagage zu helfen? Du gehörst die höchste Strafe zu bekommen und du weißt, was es ist. I did not say any word. He was going in my office from the one wall to the other as a wild animal. After a while, he stood still, looked me a little friendlier. Aus persönlicher Sympathie darfst du bleiben, aber wehe, wenn du fliehst, dann nehmen wir deinen Mann. After the Franks and the other peoples were away, I come here in and found the diary scattered on the floor. Ellie and me, Beb and me, we saw this. That is the diary of Anne. Please take it. We took all the things, but I was afraid that I had not all the paper of the diary. I knew that, but I was so in a hurry because I was afraid that this Autrichian man came again.
That the officer...
Yeah, because he said, I come back. I go to the Gestapo. And when you there go in, you did not know if you came out. I phoned this Autrichian man, and he said, yes, come. I went to him. But when I came there, his office was full of young people, secretaries and all the peoples. But he was sitting in the corner. And when I came in, I cannot speak with this man what I want. So I go to the corner to him over his desk, and I did so. I understand me. I said to me, Bitte kommen Sie morgen zurück. Heute kann ich nichts mehr für Sie tun. And then I went away. Next morning, I go to him. He was standing in the door, wait for me. I'm sorry, he said to me. I can't do anything for you because I'm not high enough. You understand me? And I said to him, I don't believe you. Go to my boss. And I go upstairs. I knocked on the door, nobody said something. Then I opened the door, and what did I see? A large table, sitting high German people. They kept on the table, and in the middle, the radio listened to England. And that was was not allowed for the German peoples. And it was very dangerous for me, because I saw what they did. And I said, who is here the boss? One man came to me, pushed me out of the door. Schweinehund, der du bist. And then I went down, and this Vienna man was standing at the door. I said, what I didn't say to you. And then I went down, and I feel het gordijn, the curtain of this play was fallen for me.
Miep Gies was one of 4 staff members who helped Anne Frank. In the early summer of 1942, Otto Frank, the manager of Opekta, called her into his office on the lower floor of the annex.
Ja.
Well, he rang me and said, Miep, would you come in a moment, please? I came in and he asked me to sit down. I have something very important to tell you, he said. A secret, really.
Een soort geheim eigenlijk.
We plan on hiding ourselves here, in this house.
Onder te duiken, in dit huis.
Are you prepared to help us?
Om ons daarbij
with provisions and so forth.
Met levensmiddelen te verzorgen, enzovoort.
I said, yes, of course. I thought that it went without saying. I was hired in 1933. I thought I would start out in the front office, but that didn't happen. On my first day, Mr. Frank took me to the kitchen. He put fruit, sugar, and a recipe in front of me, plus the utensils with which to make it, and said, let's see you prepare this recipe. I worked a good month in the kitchen. I learned properly how things should be done. I learned what mistakes could occur and how to correct those mistakes.
En wat je eventueel fout kunt maken. En hoe je fouten weer goed kunt maken.
And then Mr. Frank said, take a desk in the front office. Start answering the phone. You're our public relations officer. Our product was popular with Dutch women who wanted to make jam in 10 minutes. They had to use a certain proportion of fruit and sugar, but often what they do was use much more fruit than sugar, and it would go wrong. Mr. Frank was a very refined man, a real gentleman.
Een zeer beschaafd iemand. Een heer, weet je wel, hè.
His wife came by the office once with Anne when she was 4. Anne was a bit shy, but she gave me a slight curtsy. She was very bright-eyed. I showed her around the office. I let her do some typing and have a look out the window. She loved every bit of it. She was a very lively child. That was our first meeting, quite brief. After a while, Mr. Frank invited me to his home for a meal. Naturally, it was quite an honor.
ben ik weer
I'm back in the house where
in
Otto
het
Frank
huis
lived.
waar Otto Frank gewoond heeft. En waar ik vaak geweest ben.
I was here
waar ik
often.
hele leuke herinneringen
I have fond memories of this place.
Het grijpt me meer aan.
This
dan dat
affects
ik
me more than I'd expected.
weer in het huis te zijn.
Being back in the Frank family home where
Van de familie
I
Frank,
had been so
waar ik
often.
vaak geweest ben. Ja, dit doet pijn, hè.
This hurts.
Dit is
This
onvoorstelbaar.
is unimaginable.
Je moet er even
I have to collect myself and regress in my memories to that
Je laat
time.
even je gedachten weer
It
teruggaan.
could have all turned out so differently if we'd managed to pull through.
Het had zo anders kunnen zijn. Als we het gered hadden.
We had every hope that we would.
Ze zijn hier heel gelukkig geweest.
They were very happy here.
Allemaal.
All of them.
Anne was
Anne bristled with life. She was inquisitive. She had eyes that sparkled. By contrast, Margot was quiet and deferential.
Mevrouw Frank.
Mrs. Frank was friendly, quiet, and a bit reserved.
Een beetje teruggetrokken. En ja, meneer Frank.
When we were here,
als wij hier
Mr.
waren,
Frank always initiated conversation.
Die sprak
He
met
talked to
ons.
us.
Ik was natuurlijk
I was
zeer
quite delighted to be invited by the boss.
werd uitgenodigd door de baas.
But Mr. Frank had a certain intent in doing that.
Want, kijk eens.
See, the immigrants who came here tended to be restricted to their own groups.
Zelf weer aangewezen. Die hadden geen vrienden.
They had
hier.
no friends
Ja,
here.
meneer Frank,
But
die
Mr.
kon met
Frank
Hollandse
kept company
vrienden
with two Dutch
En
friends,
dat waren wij.
namely us.
En omdat ik zo'n interesse
Because
had
I
in
was
de
interested in
politiek en
politics
de
and
cultuur,
had
altijd met
political
hem
discussions with him in the office,
Heeft
he
hij
included
ons
us amongst his acquaintance
Ook
and
onze
amongst his
vrienden.
friends,
En dat gebeurde
albeit
later.
later.
Toen kwamen we op de zaterdag.
We had come around on the Saturday afternoon.
En daar kwam meneer Van Pels.
Mr.
met
Van
zijn
Pels
vrouw,
was there with his wife,
Dr. Pfeffer.
and Dr. Pfeffer with his lovely wife,
En er werd de hele
and we
toestand
discussed the issues
besproken.
of the day.
De toestand over de oorlog.
We discussed the war and
Hoe
debated
dat zou
this
gaan, hoe
and
dat zou
that.
gaan. Maar kijk eens,
But
die mensen
people
die
living
hier
here
waren, die voelden zich
thought they'd be
safe.
safe.
Het was Holland.
This was Holland.
En we dachten allemaal.
We thought we'd just
zullen we
stay out of it,
blijven.
like in
Net
World
als
War I.
1918. Niemand dacht
No
dat
one
we
imagined that we
ook
ever become the
slachtoffer
victims
zouden worden
of the
van de
Nazis.
nazi's. Toen kwam de
Then
10e
came the
mei.
10th of May.
Dat was een schok voor ons allemaal.
That shocked us all.
We werden opgeschrikt.
We were alarmed by the aircraft,
We wachten af.
but we waited and heard,
Toen hoorden we dat Rotterdam
eventually, that Rotterdam had been
een paar
bombed.
dagen. Nou, toen wisten we wel
We knew clearly what that would
wat
mean.
het betekende. Als Nederlander,
A good Dutchman didn't watch the occupation force roll in.
wij zijn er niet naartoe gegaan.
We didn't
Wij
go.
bleven
We stayed at our jobs.
de angst
Eventually, our fears subsided a bit because the Germans were very pragmatic.
bekeken
They
hadden.
didn't upset things too much for the first 2
De
years.
eerste 2 jaren deden
Didn't
niet veel,
interfere.
Dus dan kwam je weer bij.
That way, you could adapt much for the first 2 years.
De eerste 2 jaren deden
Didn't
niet veel,
interfere.
Dus dan kwam je weer bij.
That way, you
Dat
could
nou,
adapt
valt
and think,
wel mee.
well,
Hoewel
it's
je
not
toch
so
niet
bad.
behendig dacht verdedigen.
Although inwardly the thought remained, this is Holland. It belongs to us. Initially, they didn't interfere greatly with the Jews, but by degrees, prohibitions were introduced. Jews were not permitted on the trams. On Sunday evening, the doorbell rang, and who should be there but Mr. Van Pels? He entered, and looking grim, he said, "Margot's been conscripted into labor. She has to report tomorrow." The decision had been made to go into hiding, and I was instructed then to go the next morning and collect Margot on my bike and lead her as the first one into hiding. We arrived here. I opened the entry door and took in the bicycles. We went upstairs. When she could not go on, I prodded her forward because I felt her dismay. Where am I? What's happening? I thought, she's going to faint. Get her inside. I opened the door quickly and I jostled her inside. It all seemed a bit callous, really, like I was saying, "Now you're on your own." I ran back downstairs and opened the main door so that the staff could get in. Mr. Frank glanced round the corner, saw me, and nodded to me. It was a signal that Anne, her mother, and he had arrived safely. Therefore, I shouldn't worry. This was the bedroom of the Frank family. There was a bed here and one there. There was a table in front of the window, and in the corner, a stove. Mr. Frank had brought a box full of pictures, which Anne had clipped from magazines at home. Here's one of them. This, for example, is Heinz Rühmann. He was one of the stars of our day. Greta Garbo. I don't recall that one. Lily Baumeister. She was also a screen actress. Anne cut this one out as well. Oh, how she loved these pictures. She had other pictures of people who interested her. Norma Shearer. She really loved her. Diana Durbin. And the royal family. She clipped whatever pictures she didn't have from here. The weekly review, Cinema and Theatre. That's how she used to increase her collection. Those people all believed, logically enough, that they'd only be here temporarily. I always got the impression from each of them they thought it would be over soon. I think they counted on that. So they never indulged in amenities of any sort. In the other rooms, they didn't so much as hang a picture. Until August 21st, 1942, this was the entrance to the annex, an ordinary door. The step was still there. On that day, the staff downstairs, Mr. Kugler, and Ellie's father arrived at the shrewd idea of barricading it. And what could be better for that purpose than a bookcase set in front of? In this way, the entrance would be camouflaged. These windows were pasted with paper with a floral pattern, making it impossible to see outside. In the front, the windows were painted blue. This also obstructed any view. This is a shopping list for the butcher. We each had our specific tasks. Ellie was responsible for the baker and the milkman. My task was to bring in vegetables and meat. I found this in one of my coat pockets after the war. I was incredibly pleased to find it. This was my desk. Bep sat opposite me. This was my desk. Bep sat opposite me at a similar desk. Mr. Kleiman sat here alongside. We three formed a close-knit group. To the rear was another office belonging to Mr. Kugler. He would come by every now and then. During office hours, we didn't discuss our refugees much. Everything had to proceed as normal. Talking about them created a certain tension. It caused you to worry about them in the office, and that wouldn't do. It was vital that we appeared to the outside world, to people who came here, to be as nonchalant as possible. Mr. Frank had said, "Miep, find a greengrocer that's close by." So I used to go to a shop on the Lelygracht. But in May of 1943, when I entered the shop lady told me that her husband had been seized. They had been hiding 2 Jews themselves. Mr. Frank insisted then that I not go there for the time being because it was too dangerous. I came away from the canal and went in the opposite direction towards the Rosengracht. Here I found a small cellar. Yeah, it looked quite different in those days. It was a plain cellar where the vegetables would be lying on the ground or on pallets. Also, vegetables were scarce then. That's a striking difference. I came in and encountered an old woman who was somewhat disabled. She was whining and moaning to herself. I listened to her, and what was she talking about but her kids? Her kids who had discarded her and who only came around when they needed money or vegetables or whatever. She prattled on like that, and I agreed with her at every turn. Meanwhile, I had an eye out for what I could get. That was quite important. Surprisingly, without any trouble whatsoever, she served me. You'd come up, and there was a level of tension as you entered the room. They waited anxiously for you in a row. They waited for whatever you might say. That made me feel dreadful. Only Anne would greet me and say, "Hello, Miep. Got any news?" Her mother always hated that. Anne was often criticized for her behavior. The children, the Franks' children, were raised in far too liberal an atmosphere. I knew that when I left, Mrs. Frank and Mrs. Van Pels would quarrel over it. But Anne couldn't help herself. It was just her way. She was spontaneous and said what was on her mind. That the others just waited until I spoke, I found truly dreadful, because I could feel their utter dependency on us, their helpers. The meekness with which they greeted me each morning was terrible. They would give me a list of what they needed, a shopping list and so forth. When that business was done, one of them would scamper up to me, Mrs. Van Pels, for example, and say, "Miep, I need this or that too." I just wrote it down and tried to get it. Those were terrible events, and I related them all honestly. I recounted whatever happened in town. After a while, my husband Jan said, "Miep, please don't tell them everything. You have to remember that these people are incarcerated. They're not free to move. That's depressing enough as it is. At least dilute the truth slightly, just skim the surface." So, I did that. But that didn't get past Anne. She sensed there was more to be told. When I'd said what I had to say and I was poised to go, she would take me aside for a chat. She'd say, "Miep, tell me about this and that." She'd question me so extensively that I couldn't avoid it any longer, and I told her everything. That was Anne. Those events were discussed in the annex, what was known of them, what they'd heard. But speaking for myself, I could not believe that people would do such atrocious things. I simply could not believe it. I had no idea that Anne would write it all down. What do you imagine when you see a child with a diary? You wouldn't think she'd write such things. Dr. Pfeffer was my dentist and a close acquaintance of the Franks. The Pfeffer asked me incessantly if I could hide him. I said no. I went to Mr. Frank and told him that Pfeffer wanted to go into hiding. The next day, Mr. Frank said, "Miep, where 7 people eat, 8 can eat as well. Go tell Pfeffer you have a place for him." Naturally, he needed to sleep somewhere. It was arranged that Pfeffer would sleep here and Anne would settle over there. This was Anne's table, which she now had to share with Pfeffer. Pfeffer wrote letters to his wife here, and he studied Spanish. Therefore, he sat for long periods of time at the table. Meanwhile, Anne was attempting to carry on with her diary. This here is one of Pfeffer's letters to his wife. It's dated November 15th, 1942. My one dear love. I wish you a splendid good morning. I find it difficult to respond to you in a letter since I'm accustomed to discussing everything with you day to day. So his letter begins. It ends, concerning the cigarettes which I've saved for you for so long. I smoke but one a day. I conveyed her letters to him and his letters to her. But I never knew the contents of them, or that of the packages I delivered. This occurred regularly every 14 days. When I'd come by in the morning, he'd already be waiting for the letters that I'd bring. Naturally enough, he'd ask me, "How's my wife? What's she doing? What did she say?" So I'd stand there talking to him longer than was strictly necessary. And thereafter, I'd go up to collect my shopping list. Moreover, they were obliged to wait upstairs until I arrived. Once Mr. Frank asked, "Miep, could you please not talk to Pfeffer for so long? Anne doesn't appreciate the delay." That was the only time I got angry with Mr. Frank. I said, "Listen here, sir. You have your whole family here with you. He's here alone. I am the only link between him and his wife. Doesn't it make sense that he'd question me?" Then Mr. Frank said, "Yes, Miep, you're right." We all had, as I'd mentioned, our appointed times to go upstairs. It was my task to come around in the morning. But I so pitied them not being able to move about during the day that I'd sometimes sneak upstairs during the afternoon. One day, I snuck upstairs and I entered the Franks' bedroom.
Naar de slaapkamer van de Franks.
This was it. Anne sat writing here. I entered the room, and as I was getting accustomed to the light, I saw her sitting here. I thought, "Oh gee, I'm disturbing her while she's writing in her diary." I felt awkward and wondered what to do. Should I retreat quietly or approach her?
Of zal ik naar de toe gaan?
At that moment, she glanced up and fixed me with an expression that I never will forget. It wasn't the Anne that I knew, the friendly, charming child. She had an expression of pent-up fury. "Yes," she said, "I'm writing about you, too." I didn't know what to say. The only words I could manage were, "Well, that'll be something." Then I turned and darted back downstairs. Mrs. Frank was a very quiet, refined woman. She was a very devout woman. This is one of her prayer books. She tried to influence Anne, but Anne wasn't too keen on it. Mrs. Frank also tended to be pessimistic. "Miep," she used to say, "I won't make it. I can't go on. No good will come of this." She used to tell me all her fears and anxieties. Well, what could I say? I couldn't give her hope. I had none. Yet it helped that someone listened to her anxieties and fears.
Naar haar bangheid luisterde.
It was quiet in the office. We were about our jobs. Suddenly I looked up. The door was open, and a small man came in, pointing a revolver at me. He said to me, "Sit down." Don't even flinch. I went numb. And he left and closed the door as he went. Kleiman sat here, Pep sat there. Kleiman was the first to speak. Miep, he said, it's over. We sat without knowing what to do. Suddenly, Bep got up and she began to wail and shake through her whole body. I stayed seated. I don't know why. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't comfort her. And Kleiman went to her. He said, here's my wallet. Go to the druggist on the Leliegracht. Don't give it to him. Simply display it to show that you know me. He's a friend of mine. Ring my wife and tell her what's happened here. And then beat it and don't ever come back. Ellie looked at me helplessly, wondering what to do. I said, get going, Ellie. She took off running and she didn't come back. That alerted us that there was no sentry at the door. A bit later, I heard Jan's footsteps. It was lunchtime. Before he could come in, I ran to the door with my sandwich, my ration book, my money, and my papers. I opened the door and said, Jan, it's gone wrong here. Clear off. Off he went. There was simply no point in involving anyone else. The fewer people involved, the better. So, off he went. We sat there, Kleiman and I. He looked at me. And because it was still possible to leave, he said, Miep, there's still time. You can go. I said, no, I can't. I'm going with you. So we sat there. A little while later, the door to the inner office opened, and it stayed open. Then someone came and called Kleiman in. Behind the door, a man was speaking in German. It had a very familiar sound. He spoke with an accent. That much was clear. When Kleiman returned, the gravity of the situation became clear. At least how dire it was. He said, Miep, see that you stay out of it. Salvage what you can here. He was taken away. I thought, yeah, that's easier said than done. He was taken away. I thought, yeah, that's easier said than done. Meanwhile, the small man with the revolver had returned. He sat down opposite me at Pep's desk and rang for an extra van. They hadn't expected to find so many people. He left the door open. In the hall, I heard the German issuing orders. Finally, I recognized the accent. He spoke with a Viennese accent. I was born in Vienna. I came here at the age of 11. I've completely assimilated. When I heard that, I thought I've got one chance. I'm going to take it. And I did take it. He marched in. Before he could utter a word, I stood erect. Germans are accustomed to that. I said, "You're from Vienna?" "Me too." I said it rather cheerfully. The man was shocked so utterly that he just stood there, staring. He could never have imagined that he would meet a fellow Austrian here. He closed the door and rounded on me. He was hunched. He was going to let me have it. He said, "Papers." I gave them to him, identity papers. He looked at them, thrashed them against my face, and started to swear. "Have you no shame helping Jewish scum? You're a traitor to your country. Your crime demands the highest penalty. I think you know what that is." I didn't answer. What's the point of speaking to someone like that? I stood at attention. He seethed with anger. He paced the length of the room, swearing at me, but I didn't respond. At a certain moment, he paused. He sized me up with a more mild gaze and said, "As far as I'm concerned, you can stay. But if you ever leave, we'll seize your husband." I made a blunder then, but it came out all right. I was so angry that I said, "You keep your hands off my husband. He's got nothing to do with this. It's my affair." He said, "Don't be so foolhardy. He's up to his neck in this." He said, "I'm leaving now, but I'll be back to check if you're still here." I thought, "You can be bloody sure I will. I'm staying come what may." The thing was, I understood what Kleiman had meant. Miep, see that you stay out of it. Salvage what you can here. If one Christian remained in a house where the Jews had been, only the property of the Jews was removed. Christian property remained intact. So the business remained intact. The stocks and the equipment remained. Otherwise, 4 days later, everything would have been appropriated as the house was closed. The thought was, if she stays, the business can be saved. It was August of 1944. Anyone of any intelligence could see that the Germans were losing the war. I don't know what went on in the annex, since I was obliged to stay at my desk. He closed the door and departed. Later, I heard them all trudging down the stairs. In the interim, they were allowed to pack, and then they descended the stairs. I couldn't go to the window. I was compelled to stay here. I did so. We went upstairs then, to the Frank's bedroom. Bep and I saw lying on the ground the pages of Anne's diary. We saw scattered pages. "That's Anne's diary." "Gather it up," I said. Bep just stood there, gawking. I said, "Pick it up. Pick it up. Take it." We preserved it as carefully as possible. We were stunned. We gathered it together and went downstairs. I said, "What now, Bep?" She said, "You're the oldest. You should keep it." I said, "Okay." I took it and put it in my desk. I locked up, or at least closed, the door. And that's where it remained until Mr. Frank returned. That winter was particularly cruel. North Holland had been cut off by the Germans. Still, one had to manage to find food. People would scrounge for food in any way they could. Liberation Day. We took newspapers and old rags to the Rijnstraat and set them alight. We danced and staggered around. We embraced complete strangers. Such was our joy at being liberated. We were hopeful then. Because of his work for the city, Jan was posted at the station. His job was to register those returning from the concentration camps. He asked everyone, "Do you have any news of Mr. Frank?" No, no, no. Then one evening, Jan came home and said, "I got good news for you, Miep. Otto's on his way here." We lived on the ground floor. We stared outside. He scarcely said it when Mr. Frank approached and rang the doorbell. I ran to the door. He came in. I said, "Where's Edith?" "Edith won't be coming back. I still have hope for the children." You can imagine how happy we were to have him back. I always sorted the post in the office and brought it to him. I sorted it and gave him what I had. He took it. Suddenly an icy silence descended, a silence which still speaks. I looked up. He'd gone bone white. He gave me this letter. Here, read it. "I hereby declare that Anne Frank and Margot Frank perished in the camp Bergen-Belsen, where I worked as a nurse." Mrs. M. Brandes Brillers Slijper. I stood up then. And opened my desk drawer. I gathered up every volume of the diary and presented them to Mr. Frank with the words, "This is the legacy of your daughter, Anne." Time and again he would say to me, "Miep, come here. Look at what that child has written." That was troublesome for me. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't stand to read it. I was afraid. I don't know why. I said, "Sure, I'm coming." I was afraid. I don't know why. I said, "Sure, I'm coming." When the first edition was printed, he said, "Miep, you should read the book." I said, "Sure, I will." When the second edition was printed, Mr. Frank got angry, said, "Read it now. I want you to." I said, "Okay, I'll read it when I'm alone, so I can weep and wail as I please." I read through to the end. I have to admit, I was happy. It was like having them all back again. It wasn't the frightful task I'd imagined it to be. I was relieved, but more than that, I was happy. I could even hear their voices again.
As you've never endured a war, I'll tell you our wishes for when we emerge from hiding. Margot and Mr. Van Pels want to have a hot fall bath. Mrs. Van Pels wants to go and eat cream cakes. Feather only wants his Charlotte, and Mother her cup of coffee. Peter wants to go to the cinema. And I? For sheer joy, I wouldn't know where to begin.
Hers was the face and the voice of the millions who were lost. But we would never have known the story of Anne Frank had it not been for this woman, 87-year-old Miep Gies.
You are the only one who survives, who knows this story firsthand.
I'm the last one alive out of the diary of Anne Frank.
Did you know there was a hiding place in the office?
No, I did not know.
Behind this bookcase was a secret apartment where Anne and her family could hide from the Nazis.
Did you think this is very dangerous? I am risking my life.
Not a single moment. Look, Hitler had our country. We could not fight with guns. We could only fight with your brains. We love these people, and these people did nothing.
Miep says she was closest to 13-year-old Anne, and when she discovered Anne was keeping a diary, Miep brought her extra notebooks and paper. Anne would write all the details of her life in hiding in that diary, including her fears for Miep and the others who helped them.
We certainly shouldn't bother them with our woes. Oh, they're such good, noble people. Miep and Mr. Kugler bear the greatest burden for us, for all us in hiding. Miep in everything she does.
In a way, Anne has become a saint. What was the real Anne like?
The real Anne. Very curious. And when you speak with her, you became the feeling that you speak with a much older person.
Miep says writing wasn't the only thing Anne loved. Anne covered her bedroom walls with pictures of movie stars and told Miep about a secret dream.
She wanted to go to Hollywood.
Be a movie star.
A movie star. She wanted a movie star.
Anne would never get to Hollywood, but in 1959, Hollywood would make this movie based on her diary, a movie which portrayed her first kiss with 16-year-old Peter, who also lived in the hiding place. Little did she know he would be her only love. As the war raged on and the families entered their 4th month in hiding, the strain began to take a toll. To relieve the boredom, Anne begged Miep and her husband to sleep over.
We had lots of fun on Monday. Miep and her husband spent the night with us.
I did not sleep one moment. And I was so happy next morning to go down to the office. And I was free.
That was one night.
That was one night. So you can understand, these people has 2 years in such a situation. Every day, every night.
Tell me what happened on August 4th.
It must be between 10 and 11. The door were open. There came a man in with a gun to me. Sit down, not a single word.
You never got a chance to say goodbye to the Franks.
No.
Did you hear them?
I hear their feet coming down slowly, like beaten dogs. But I could not go to them and say goodbye.
Miep was lucky. The police decided not to arrest her. She was able to return to the hiding place where she discovered the diary and saved it for Anne. But Anne would never write in it again. She would die in a concentration camp in March of 1945. She was 15 years old. The camp was liberated 1 month later.
It's difficult in times like these. Ideals, dreams, and cherished hopes rise within us, only to be crushed by grim reality. It's a wonder I haven't abandoned all my ideals. Yet I cling to them because I still believe, in spite of everything, that people are truly good at heart.
Of the 8 people who had gone into hiding, only Anne's father would survive. He came back to Amsterdam, to the only family he had left. He moved in with Miep and her husband.
He had lost his wife, his 2 children, but he had now Anne's diary.
Today, 24 million copies of the diary in 55 languages have been published. And just last year, a new documentary based on the Anne Frank story won an Academy Award. The documentary's director asked Miep to join him on stage, and Miep realized that 51 years after Anne's death, she was about to fulfill a young girl's dream.
I was standing there, looking to these many, many people, and I was thinking to Anne, Anne, I have brought you to Hollywood as you like it, as you wish.
Did you feel like she was with you at that moment?
She's always with me, yes. Sometimes I look at her and I'm talking to her.
What do you tell her?
I ask her if she is satisfied what I do for her.
And what does she say?
It is okay, Miep.